So our next speaker will be Metropolitan Kallistos. He's of course not a person that needs a lengthy introduction. He's one of the founding fathers of our institute and also the president of IOCS. He has remained faithful to the institute for almost 20 years from its very beginning. Besides, Metropolitan Kallistos is certainly one of the best known and also most loved personalities and teachers in the Orthodox world, in the UK as well as worldwide. Through his writings and his teaching, he has made a huge contribution to the life of the Orthodox Church as well as to the ecumenical dialogue between Orthodoxy and non-Orthodox churches. I'm convinced that almost all of you have in some way or other been enriched by his pioneering work that he started at a time when Orthodoxy was still considered to be something quite exotic in the West. And today, Metropolitan Kallistos is going to talk, like Father John, about the history of our institute. Radhika, thank you for coming. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I was in fact asked to speak more broadly about the situation of the Orthodox Church in the British Isles. Problems and opportunities, weaknesses and strengths. So that is what I shall in fact talk about, but I will try and bring the Institute into this. Mention was made earlier about a visit by the Prince Philip to our institute. I remember on one occasion he came, and on behalf of the institute I presented him with 4 volumes of the English Philokalia, and he looked rather quizzically at these and he said, "Do I have to read all this?" So I said, "Yes, indeed, every page." Well, I wanted to ask him how he's getting on, but I haven't seen him recently. He seems to be avoiding me. I have with me a slim volume that for the last 40 years has provided me with constant inspiration. It is entitled Signs of the Times. The Times newspaper ran a competition inviting readers to send in photographs of unusual or enigmatic road signs and other such signs. And yes, indeed, one has many striking examples in this excellent book. For example, from a parking lot, a notice saying, "Parking is limited to 60 minutes in any 1 hour." That's actually from Wales. Yes. Then another one is from a marketplace. It says, "Cattle and calves straight on, pigs turn right." And then there is an enormous arrow pointing left. And as the Times wisely comments, it's a little unkind when pigs have taken the trouble to learn how to read, deliberately to confuse their sense of direction. Again, from Africa, there's a sign saying, "Elephants have right of way," which, as the Times comments, is realistic. And also another signpost where there is a bend round which you cannot see, and a notice saying, "Deadly hazard ahead." But as the Times says, this is uninformative to the point of churlishness. Now, if we were asked to invent some appropriate signposts for our institute and more broadly for our Orthodox witness in Britain today, what would we want to write on our signs? Are we spending too much time parked in the same place? What direction should we be taking? What are the elephants that we are failing to notice? And what are the deadly hazards that we should be avoiding? Now, looking at our Orthodox Church in Britain, the context in which our institute exists, it's interesting to read an article in the Classical Review dating from the year 1827. And the author of this article, anonymous, says that out of curiosity, he was inspired to visit the only Orthodox place of worship existing in Britain at that time. And this was the embassy chapel inside the Russian embassy. And he said that he entered a small and ordinarily furnished room, and that he found there a congregation of some 10 to 12 people. And he says, is it not extraordinary that this great Orthodox Church, which worldwide has many millions of members, should have in the British Isles no more than 10 to 12 worshippers? As he puts it, an undistinguishable drop in the ocean of metropolitan population. That was the situation then in 1827. And if you had looked at the situation of the Orthodox Church in 1939, on the eve of the Second World War, you would have found a certain expansion, but limited. There were at that time in the British Isles 5 Orthodox churches, no more. What is the situation today? We have in the British Isles 302 places where the liturgy is celebrated. I get this figure from the 2017 Directory of Orthodox Parishes and Clergy in the British Isles and Ireland that is published by the Orthodox Fellowship of St. John the Baptist. So from 1827 to 1917, 190 years, there has been a very remarkable expansion. Not all of those 302 places of worship have a church of their own or a resident priest, nor in all of them is the Divine Liturgy celebrated every Sunday. But some of the places of worship, the 302, are of considerable size. For example, the Greek Cypriot community in Wood Green in London has on its staff 1 bishop, 5 priests, and 2 deacons. I suppose in Britain, though I didn't have time to tot up the numbers, there are rather more than 200 Orthodox clergy, and probably about 1/3 of these are of Western background, British, American, Belgian, and elsewhere. So we are no longer such an indistinguishable drop. We have indeed expanded very rapidly. Now, what should be our main witness here in the West, and more particularly in our Cambridge Institute of Orthodox Studies? Here I might mention 3 topics. When I was ordained priest, I asked the bishop who ordained me for advice as to my future ministry, and he said, always have 3 points in your sermon, not less and not more. I don't think he's the first person to say that. I think it's quite enough to have 1 point in your sermon. We often hear sermons that have no point at all. When I was consecrated bishop, I asked the presiding hierarch for advice about my episcopal ministry, and he said, at the end of the service, always fold up your own vestments, that don't let the deacons do it. Well, I try to follow both pieces of advice. So I would like, in regard to our witness, to mention 3 themes, which I could summarize as creation, celebration, co-inherence. In other words, the world, the church, and God, or if you like, environment, Eucharist, and exchange. Creation. All of us, I think, feel today a sense of doom and crisis, of dark foreboding. We feel a fear of an all-embracing environmental catastrophe. That was not the case in my young days. We didn't think that way, but we do now. We are worried about this cosmic temple in which we have been placed by God. I think of the Orthodox service when in danger of earthquake. The earth, in the course of that service, we include this text, the earth, though without words, yet cries aloud, why, all peoples, do you inflict such evils upon me? And we are inflicting great evils upon the earth, and we are now beginning to witness nature hitting back. I was struck when I went to Egypt some years ago and visited the high-level dam at Aswan. This was an ambitious project of NASA, involved the submerging of a number of villages, people deprived of their homes. And I was told that this project had gravely disrupted the irrigation system of Egypt, and also the artificial lake that NASA had created had bred a new kind of crocodile, small but extremely venomous and aggressive. To me, that was a parable of what happens when we act insensitively towards nature. So, yes, I think we Orthodox have a very rich theology of creation. I don't say we always carry it out in practice, because environmentally some of the worst examples of bad environmental practice are to be found in Orthodox countries. But if we look in our spiritual resources, we will find yes, indeed, that we can see there a possible way forward in the ecological crisis. What is needed is not better technology, but, as the late Patriarch Demetrius of Constantinople said, a Eucharistic and ascetic spirit. We need to rediscover our theology of creation, to renew our conviction that the earth is holy, that nature is sacred, that the world is a sacrament of the divine presence. And many Western Christians, and indeed non-Christians, are rediscovering the holiness of the earth, and we Orthodox can surely play a part in this rediscovery of the holiness of the earth that is so vital for our time. And I hope that our institute will make its contribution here. I think of the saying attributed to Christ, though not found in the canonical Gospels, "Lift the stone and you will find me. Cut the wood in two and there am I." This is our vocation. We are to see God in all things and all things in God. Not pantheism, but panentheism. And because the God that we find everywhere is Christ, the Logos, not just panentheism, but pan-en-Christification. The word is clumsy, but the idea that it expresses is full of value and salvation. We have guidance on this theme of the holiness of the earth, the theology of creation, from such fathers as St. Maximus the Confessor, St. Gregory Palamas. And these are the kind of authors whom surely we should be studying in our institute and encouraging people to learn about. But I emphasize, it is not one-sided. We Orthodox have to learn as well as to share our treasures with the West. Saint Innocent of Alaska and Moscow in the 19th century said of the bishop is at one and the same time the teacher and the disciple of his flock. And that's surely our general position. We do have to teach and bear witness, but we have to learn and to listen. I see a second theme which I regard as central to the life of our institute, and that is celebration. Our Orthodox spirituality is not only creation-centered, but Eucharistic. Our sense of nature as sacred is summed up in the Divine Liturgy when we offer the world back to God in thanksgiving. Thine own from thine own we offer thee in all things and for all things. So there is a second master theme which our institute and Orthodox in general are called to share with the West. Our sense of the Divine Liturgy as heaven on earth. We are never alone. The powers of heaven are worshipping with us invisibly, as we say in the liturgy of the pre-sanctified. That was my experience at the first Orthodox service I ever attended. I went by chance, or perhaps by providence, when I was still a schoolboy, on a Saturday evening into the Russian church in London, at that time in Buckingham Palace Road, where Victoria Coach Station is now. I saw the Russian church, and out of curiosity, I pushed open the door and went inside. Outside it was a hot summer's day, such as today. Inside the church was cavernous and dark. And my first impression on entering the church was, this church is empty, because there were no pews, just a large expanse of polished floor. Then, as my eyes grew a little more accustomed to the gloom in the church, I saw that there were, in fact, icons along the wall with lamps burning in front of them, an icon screen at the east end with candles in front of it, and a small congregation, a few elderly people, and a choir, small choir somewhere out of sight. Now, my first impression entering that church had been, it is entirely empty. But then, as I grew accustomed to my surroundings, I had an opposite impression. I felt not this church is empty, but this church is full of invisible worshippers, whom I cannot see, but who are praying with me. The saints, the angels, the Mother of God, Christ himself, they are all here. I had the experience of the church as heaven on earth. Not empty, but full. And it was that experience which led me to become a member of the Orthodox Church. Years later, I read the story of the envoys of Prince Vladimir of Kiev, who were sent to Constantinople, and how they experienced the divine liturgy. We knew not, they said, whether we were in heaven or on earth, for surely there is no such beauty anywhere on earth. This alone we know, that God is present there in their worship. Well, I hadn't read that story when I first went to the Russian church in Buckingham Palace Road, but when I read it, I started with amazement. That had been exactly my experience. Now, of course, we Orthodox all too often experience a tragic gap between theory and practice. What is the experience of Western visitors to Orthodox services, whether here in Britain or elsewhere? All too often they find that most of the congregation arrive late. My Cypriot parishioners in Oxford ask me, not when does the service begin, but when does the service end? They will find that people gossip. They will find perhaps that only a few babies receive communion, though that has changed in my lifetime in many Orthodox churches. So yes, we Orthodox do have a constant need for renewal in our liturgical practice. We have no room for complacency. But I believe this is something that we should share with Western Christians and indeed with non-Christians. And this is something to which our institute should bear witness, the Divine Liturgy. St. John of Kronstadt said, the Eucharist is a continual miracle. Let us, as members of the Institute, renew our sense of wonder in the presence of this miracle. And then a third aspect of our witness, a third task for us Orthodox in the Western world today, to bear witness to the central significance of the doctrine of the Trinity, to the coherence, the reciprocal love of God, who is not just one, but one in three. What practical difference does the doctrine of the Trinity make to our daily life? Father Pavel Florensky said, words quoted by Vladimir Lossky, between the Trinity and hell, There lies no other choice. Why did he say that? The friend of Tolstoy, Fyodorov, said, "Our social program is the Trinity." What does that mean? What does the doctrine of the Trinity tell us about our personhood? What does it say about social and political action? That, I think, also is central to our Orthodox witness in the West and to our work in the Cambridge Institute. What are strengths and weaknesses of our Orthodox Church in Britain? I just mentioned one strength. We have a vital monastic presence in the community at Tollescent Nights, dedicated to St. John the Forerunner, the Baptist. And we're very fortunate to have such a monastery. It's a blessing to all of us Orthodox. All too often in the West there is a lack of monastic presence among the Orthodox. We, fortunately in Britain, have a presence that blesses us all. But what about weaknesses? One obvious weakness of the Orthodox in Britain, as in the Western world generally, is the multiplicity of jurisdictions. We do not have in Britain one single Orthodox church. We have a wide number of different dioceses based on a national principle in most cases. There is the Greek Archdiocese. There are 3 jurisdictions in the Russian tradition in Britain. Some under the Moscow Patriarchate, the second under the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, now fortunately in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, and the third is the churches of the Russian tradition that are under the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Then we have other parishes under Patriarchate of Antioch, the Church of Serbia, the Church of Bulgaria, the Church of Romania, the Church of Georgia, and the Ukraine. At least 10 Orthodox jurisdictions, perhaps more. Now, fortunately, we are working towards greater unity. For the last few years, we have had an Episcopal Assembly involving all the bishops who have pastoral responsibility here in the British Isles. And we meet twice a year. I would like us to meet more often. I hope the work of this Episcopal Assembly can be developed and that it will become a true pan-Orthodox synod for all the Orthodox in this country. But this is an aspect also of our Cambridge Institute. We aim to be pan-Orthodox, to involve all the Orthodox different ecclesiastical families at work in this country. And indeed, of course, we hope to have an international outreach. We welcome students from abroad, and we welcome non-Orthodox students. So I would see our Cambridge Institute as an important sign of the times, pointing to the direction which the Orthodox Church should follow here in the British Isles. We are one in faith, but we do not manifest that unity as we should through being more closely integrated into a single local church. Our institute can surely contribute to that vital task. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Metropolitan. We now have about 20 minutes for questions before lunch?
Yes, thank you very much, Bishop Kallistos. You mentioned at the end the problem of multiple jurisdictions. Thank you. It seems to me that the various Orthodox jurisdictions and hierarchs generally don't see the Institute as, well, bluntly, particularly relevant to their own flocks. They don't seem to be making use of it as something that could be serving their own dioceses. And I wonder if you could say something about why this might be and what could be done about it.
First of all, I would wish to draw attention to an exception to what you say, that we've always received support and encouragement from Archbishop Elisee of Suraj, who is with us now, and he has always taken a positive attitude towards our institute and has indeed helped us, and for that we are grateful, Vladika. But you're quite right. All too often the Orthodox do not, as it were, own our institute. They do not see it as their institute. Orthodox have often a narrow perspective. All too often they're only interested in their own parish or in their own diocese. And the fact that we are pan-Orthodox in our institute means that all too often people feel, well, it doesn't belong to us. So I would certainly hope that we can encourage greater support from parishes and individuals here in Britain.
Thank you so much, Metropolitan, for your wonderful talk. Can I ask you to tell us a bit more about pantheism?
About, sorry, you could...
Pantheism.
Pantheism.
And how do we get this out? How can we get this out to people out in the streets of Cambridge, this idea, this very important idea?
Yes. First, the word pantheism, if you're not particularly familiar with it, pantheism, as distinct from panentheism, pantheism says the world is God and God is the world. And that is not a Christian option. But panentheism, N, says God is in the world and the world is in God. Here I recall some words of Father Alexander Schmemann in his book, The World of Sacraments, alias Sacraments and Orthodoxy, alias For the Life of the World, but this is not 3 books but 1. And at the end of this excellent book he says, the Christian is the one who, wherever he or she looks, sees everywhere Christ and rejoices in him. So panentheism is to see God everywhere, to find all things speaking to us about God the Creator. It is to feel the nearness of God as well as the otherness. It is to, yes, wherever we look to find Christ. The world is not secular, it is sacred. Secularism only sees the surface of the world. We are to look deeper. But clearly, secularism today, the de-sanctification of nature, the failure to respond to the divine presence, that is the greatest problem that we have witnessing to God in the Western world. So few people these days have a living sense of God, at any rate in this country. So panentheism is one approach to God, to see him not merely as transcendent and remote, but to see him as very near to us in all places and at all moments. That's why I quoted from the liturgy, "Thine own, from thine own we offer thee, in all things and for all things." It is our task as humans, made in the image and likeness of God, to offer the world back to God in thanksgiving. Notice that it doesn't just say we offer all persons. Some translations say on behalf of all and for all, but the Greek says in all things and for all things. If you say we offer on behalf of all, that will naturally convey to people the impression that we are offering on behalf of our fellow humans. So we are, but we are also offering the divine liturgy on behalf and in and through all created things. So yes, I see the liturgy and our life of prayer in general as having a cosmic dimension. So that is part of what I had in mind when I spoke of panentheism. And I believe that we Orthodox can indeed provide a possible witness here. I think of just one story. On the holy mountain of Athos, there is a certain hermit. Perhaps he's dead now. And it is his custom to sit outside his cell, which is on the mountainside facing to the west, and to watch the setting sun, a scene of extraordinary beauty. And then he goes into his chapel, into the darkness, to practice his nightly vigil. One day, this hermit had a disciple who came to live with him. And he made the disciple sit with him in silence and watch the setting sun. And this they did for 2 or 3 days, when the young disciple, being a person of active and practical temperament, said to Elder Geronte, "Why do we have to sit and look at this view? It's a very nice view, but we looked at it yesterday and the day before. What are you doing when you sit there watching the setting sun in silence?" And the old hermit said, "Mazero ilin," which could be translated as, "I am collecting material," or "I am gathering fuel." First, he looked out on the created world, and he apprehended the presence of God there in the beauty of nature. Then he went into his chapel to meet God in the darkness in his heart. So exactly, he was gathering fuel, assembling material for his prayer. That would be an expression of what I understand pantheism to be.
Thank you very much.
Father, you spoke of the need for studying the fathers for environmental concerns, and you have been exceedingly supportive of my research and vision in extending the environmental concerns to the individual animals within that environment, and specifically of their suffering. You have also agreed to be patron of a pan-Orthodox animal protection society, and there are many here from different countries, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite others to make contact with me to discuss the possibility at some time in the future of creating individual nation groups. And this aspect of pan-Orthodox outreach is rare. I established a group in Seychelles when I lived there on the second occasion, an Orthodox Christian society, and it was like holding wild horses at times with the different groups, but we can do it, and there is most certainly a need to extend what has been extremely valuable discussions in Orthodoxy on the environmental concern. But we are the only large Christian organisation that do not have an animal protection society. There is a very small group we established in Cyprus, but we don't have this overarching group, and I am so thankful for your engagement and continued support in making people aware of our rich heritage in Orthodoxy on this subject, which is just not known. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. I think you are Christine Nellist, is that right?
Doctor now, Father.
Doctor. Yes, all right. And thank you for speaking to us about the need for compassion towards animals, and that is certainly part of our positive attitude towards the created order. And once again, I emphasize that I do not think we Orthodox are in any way blameless or ideal, that in the Orthodox countries there is plenty of cruelty towards animals. But I do believe that we have in our theology a basis for concern and compassion for animal creation. In our Evkologion, our book of prayers, you will find prayers for the animals there. After all, in an agricultural society, the good health of the animals is of extreme importance. And we have in the lives of the saints, Western as well as Eastern, many stories of the fellowship between humans and animals. And these are not just sentimental tales to please children. The saints who have recovered the undistorted image live, as Adam did before the fall, in harmony with the animals. And this is something that is very important. We are not saved from the world, we are saved with the world. And the world includes the animal creation. So continue your work, and I hope you'll get more Orthodox support.
Well, thank you very much for your talk, and also for the engagement in between Orthodox and Western theology, where you have had a very important part in your own writings, and which I think is a very important part of what the Institute does by being an Orthodox presence here in Cambridge to help us to study and learn together from one another. One of the great things where I think the dialogue between Western and Orthodox Christianity has helped us in the West to think through more clearly, I think, is the work on personhood and the Trinity.
Yes.
In particular through the work of John Zizoulas, but also many others, including your own. What would you think would be the next area where we should study and learn from one another, study together and learn from one another in the way in which we have done about Trinity and personhood?
I'm very glad you mentioned this point, which I passed over rather quickly because I felt I'd been talking long enough and you might be getting hungry for your lunch. I was taught when I first began speaking 3 principles, each beginning with S. The first was, when you speak, stand up. Well, now I'm getting old, I sit down. But the second is stand up, speak up, and the third, shut up. And the third is the most difficult to learn. But I'm glad you took this point up. I feel we're only at the beginning of our exploration of the Christian understanding of the human person. Probably in the ecumenical movement of the 20th century, and more particularly in Orthodox theology of the 20th century, the main theme was the doctrine of the church, ecclesiology. What is the church? Who are members of it? How are we to understand the divisions among Christians? That remains still of crucial importance, but now we are moving towards the question, what is the human person? What does it mean to be in the image and likeness of God, which means in the image and likeness of Christ, the divine Logos, but also in the image of the Holy Trinity. So I think we are seeing a move now in Orthodox theology and perhaps in inter-church discussions, a move from ecclesiology to anthropology. That's quite striking in the Anglican Orthodox doctrinal discussions. The last statement produced by that dialogue is precisely on what does it mean to be in the image of God. I forget the title. I am wonderfully and fearfully made, I think, a quotation from the Psalms. I think we've got quite a long way to go there. When I was lecturing in Oxford before I retired, I used to give from time to time a course on the doctrine of the human person in the Greek fathers. But I found it quite difficult to discover a single book which really covered that subject adequately. You'll find lots of references to it in different books and articles, but I felt the literature needed developing. So I think we've got to go much more deeply into this question of human personhood. What should we do beyond that? Well, I'm not so sure. I think this is quite enough to occupy us for the whole of the 21st century.
There's going to be time for one brief question.
I've got a very brief question on another point of your talk, which is, what is wrong with deacons folding the vestments?
What is?
Wrong with deacons folding the vestments.
Oh, well. Every priest let us say, has his own way of folding up his vestments. And bishops do as well. And if people fold up your vestments in the wrong way, then they need ironing. And bishops are unmarried, they are monks, so they haven't got a matushka, a presbytera, a wife to do the ironing for them. So they have to be very careful how they fold their vestments up.
Just to say thank you very much, Your Eminence, for your talk, and thank you for all the questions. We're there at 1:30, and lunch, I think, is expecting us in the gallery where coffee and tea were this morning. So thank you very much again. Let's refresh ourselves.